Hey guys, welcome to Punky's World. Okay, I am here to tell you about my Irish family. As you know, today is St. Patrick's Day. I did my eyes in another video. And, you know, they say everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day. No, I'm Irish every day. On my father's side of the family, I am French Canadian and Irish, and a little English thrown in. Majority French and Irish, according to my DNA. On my mother's side, I'm majority English. You know, English, Welsh, which is English, and a little bit of Nordic countries thrown in for good measure. But basically, on my mother's side, I'm English. Both sides of my mother's side. So I guess you could say I am primarily United Kingdom and French Canadian. Because when I say I'm Irish, I'm Northern Ireland. And Scotland. I have family I can trace back to Scotland as well. Anyway, my family came here on a ship called the Trinacria. Still don't know if we're pronouncing that correctly, but that's what it looks like. In May of 1873. My great-grandfather, my father and uncle's grandfather, was about 3 years old, almost 4 years old when they came here. He was born in 1869, ironically the same year as my father's grandfather on the other side. Although his grandmother on the other side was born in 1880. So there was an 11-year difference between his grandparents. That's okay. There was a 12-year difference between his parents and a 10-year difference between mine. Anyway, and my great-grandmother, my father and uncle's grandmother, came here a little bit later, not much later, maybe a year or two later. From what we can gather, we have different years according to the census. She was born about 1870 to 1872, so she was not, I mean, she was only between a year and 3 years younger than him. When my great-great-grandfather brought his family over here, his name was James Wilson. My great-grandfather's name was Thomas. When James came over here, he was sponsored by a man who owned the mills in the Irish, what became the Irish village of Enfield, Massachusetts, called Smith's Village. And he sponsored him to come over to work in the mills. We have all this on his the final record where he became a citizen. What I need is his declaration, which lists all of his kids and stuff. Like I said, they came over in 1873. They settled in Smith's Village in Enfield, Massachusetts, not Connecticut. and they spoke Gaelic, and yes, it's pronounced Gaelic, not Gaelic, the language. English. My great-grandfather spoke, I was told, 7 languages: Gaelic, English, Spanish, Celtic. I don't remember the other 2. But for a man who didn't have a ton of education, because they started working young as soon as they could, because not only were they mill workers, they were farmers as well. So they were very fortunate, to have steady employment in the mills, and they worked really hard. And that's where my dad got it from, his amazing work ethic. It was bred into him. My Uncle David worked hard too, until basically he had no knee. So they had to remove the inner workings of his knee. It couldn't yet do a knee replacement. And the first place that could do it was in Canada. So they sent him up to Canada to get a knee replacement. I just remember when, because in years, he didn't bend his knee. It stayed straight when he walked because he had no components in his knee at all. He did not have a knee. And so after he got his knee replacement and he had recovered, and I saw him walking with a bent knee in an almost normal manner, I cried. I'm like, oh my God, Uncle, you can walk. You can bend your knee again. I just remember hugging him. It was an emotional moment, you know? Um, Sorry, my nose is bleeding. So yeah. And once my uncle could walk again, he got a part-time job because he was older and nobody wanted to hire him at that point. And the job that he was skilled at didn't exist anymore. My uncle, like my father, worked in mills. Only in his case, he worked in a felt mill. So it's a pretty unique skill set. And that became a problem for my father when the mill shut down. But anyway, back to the rest of the Irish family. I, in doing genealogy, have found one of the things I've found is Irish naming patterns. Well, what does that mean? Well, the Irish had specific patterns in how they named their children. So you're going to end up with several children with the same name. Because like you can predict, I can predict my great-great-grandfather's brother's names based on his son's names. For instance, his oldest son was John, which means his oldest brother was John. Then his next son was James. His name was James. Then the second son was named after the dad, James. And then the next son was Robert, another brother. And then the next son was Thomas, it must be another brother, which would be my great-grandfather. And they had the daughters, which could predict Jane Kennedy's sister's names, his wife. Because, again, the oldest daughter would be named after the maternal grandmother. The second daughter would be named after the mother. So, which is weird because there was no Jane. I'm wondering if Jane was her middle name. And she just always went by Jane. Like she was Mariah Jane Kennedy, because she had Mariah Louise. She had Mary Ann. She had, different variations of that. So I'm wondering if, even though her name on her death certificate was Jane, and in the census was Jane, because Irish women were called by their middle names often. They still are. I have a friend whose family is very Irish, and they call her by her middle name. My mother and I have always called her by her first and middle name, Mary Kate. And my mother talked to her because she knew she came from a very Irish family about my great-grandmother's situation, and she said Patience is probably her middle name, which makes perfect sense because the person I found that I believe to be her mother is Paninia Patience. So that makes perfect sense. And Irish women tended to go by their middle names. Just like Mary Kate to her family's Kate. Thank you, Mary Kate, for that bit of insight if you happen to watch my video, which you might. I love you to pieces, honey. I love you for more than that. You're just a good lady. So, yeah, the Irish women would use middle names. Seems like a lot of the Irish men didn't have middle names. That seemed common almost. So yeah, those are things that the naming patterns disappear over time. My great-grandparents, my grandfather's parents, didn't really use the naming patterns. I mean, they did and they did, if that makes sense. Like with their sons, they did name my grandfather after one of his father's brothers, Robert, and they did name one of their sons James after one of their father's brothers, but the other one was William. He didn't have a brother William. And then the girls, well, one of them was Mabel Jane, and Jane, of course, was her grandmother's name. Florence Patrice, I have absolutely no idea where that came from. I think that's all 5 of them. In order they would go: Florence Patrice, James, Edward, Robert, no middle name, Mabel Jane, and Uncle Bill. So, yeah. not quite following Irish naming patterns. But, and then their kids didn't follow them at all. Because my uncle, well, my father was named Robert after his father. He was a junior. My next uncle was named David Thomas after both of his grandfathers. His mother's father was David, his father's father was Thomas. Originally, he was supposed to be Thomas David because, for whatever reason, Aunt Gladys, Uncle Bill's wife, wanted to name her son David, and they were about the same age. My grandmother said, "It's my father's name. Can't you name him Thomas? I'll do David Thomas and you do Thomas David." So that, they couldn't agree on it. And so my grandmother ended up doing Thomas David. And so in the city where my uncle was born in the hospital, it says Thomas David on his birth certificate. In the town where he came home and where he grew up, it got reversed and became David Thomas. My grandmother never fought it, and my uncle really was not aware of the discrepancy until he went in the Navy, and they said, "What is your name?" And he said, "David Thomas." "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, according to your birth certificate in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts, your name is Thomas David, and according to your birth certificate in Sutton, Manchog, Massachusetts, your name is David Thomas." Say what now? So, yeah. My mother and I found that out because the old Worcester records are free online. So you can look at them. My mother's like, "What? Get your uncle on the phone." So, and my youngest uncle was Richard. He did not have a middle name. A lot of people in my family didn't. Neither of my grandparents did. I guess it wasn't necessarily common in French or Irish culture at the time for middle names, in particular boys. Although my uncle was the only one with a middle name because he was named after both of his grandfathers. And my cousin named her son, my uncle's daughter, named her son Robert Thomas after his father, his uncle, and his grandfather's middle name. It's confusing. My cousin married a Rob. So her son was named Robert after him, but also after her uncle, my father. So it was a dual naming thing. And then the Thomas was because that was her father's middle name, which was her great-grandfather's first name, our great-grandfather's first name. So his name is very much family, which is cool. Hi, Zitch. Anyway, so sometimes names stay with families, like my name. I'm named after my grandmother. But I do not have a middle name because she didn't. So, just looking at pictures behind the camera, my uncle, my aunt and my dad, well, my uncle and his wife, my aunt, and my aunt and my dad's sister, and my mom and dad. So, I am going to do a quick video over on Kid Missing. And I will begin editing so I can get editing done before my which is in 2 hours, so I have plenty of time. So thank you so much for joining me and walking down this Irish path. My family is from Portadown, Milltown, Tartaracan, all in County Armagh. Sorry. God bless you. Bye-bye.